Hi, welcome to the Salem Round Table. I'm excited today to have Mayor Chuck Bennett with us to have a conversation. Mayor Chuck's been in Salem for 54 years. He graduated from Willamette University in 1970. He was elected to Congress in 1982, served after that on the council for 9 years, and in 2017 was elected to mayor, where he's serving his second term. It is a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you.
So
Thank you. I want to correct one thing. I wasn't in Congress. I was in the State House.
The State House of Representatives.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I'm sure Congressman Schrader will
Yeah, right, Congressman, right.
contact you and correct that.
and edit this little clip.
Yeah.
That's good. Good. Hey, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your personal life and how you got
Sure.
into politics. And so you said you grew up in Spokane in our earlier conversation, and you
Yeah.
ended up in Salem at college. But how did that lead to journalism and into politics?
Well, I majored in English at Willamette. Came out with the skill set you have when you major in English, which is an ability to write. And so I worked for a couple of years. I needed to get a job right away, so I went to work at Damage State Hospital, worked as a psychiatric aide on one of the wards up there. Learned a lot, and it's actually become applicable in some of the situations I see here in Salem these days. And then I got a job as what's called a stringer for the old Capital Journal, covering Yamhill County and McMinnville. Then I was hired as editor of the Woodburn Independent, the newspaper in Woodburn. Then hired full-time by the Capital Journal to be their City Hall reporter for several years. When there was an afternoon newspaper, it's the journal half of the Statesman Journal.
You remember those days?
Oh yeah,
Afternoon
very well.
newspaper?
I mean, I learned to do newspapering on an old Royal typewriter. I hadn't know how to change typewriter ribbons, where there were no computers available to us at that time. And all of our editing was done with pencil. We put our paper together with glue guns. It was it was old time, kind of like the old movie journalism. Then I went to work as editor of the Staten Mail out in Staten. While there, I got I'd always been interested in politics. I was elected to the state legislature, served a term. And really enjoyed it. I had some real successes at it, both for the area and just personally. When I came out, I went to work as a lobbyist. It's a common transition. Sure. It's very difficult at that time to go back and forth between politics and journalism. It sort of occurs now much more routinely. Back then, when you made a choice to go into politics, you really left journalism behind. So I had been in the business for about 11, 12 years. Right. And so I went into lobbying, had my own lobbying firm for a number of years, about 15 years, and did political consulting. Then I went to work about 20-some years ago for the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators, primarily specializing in public school funding, public school policy, and did that for 20 years and retired 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I've been busy.
Yes, that's great. That's to put it mildly, right? So I didn't realize you were in journalism actually the first part of your career from like 1970 to 1982 before you transitioned to the Oregon House of Representatives.
Right.
And you served a term there, then did your own
Lobbying. Yeah.
And at some point, you got connected to City Council in 2006 or so.
Well, I did a lot of volunteer. I served on the library board, the Cultural Tourism Promotion Advisory Board, the Planning Commission, the Budget Committee, those kinds of boards and commissions volunteering. And then there was an opening occurred in my ward. I live in Ward 1, which is sort of the central Salem ward. I live very close in. I live in the same neighborhood I've lived in for many, many years. And I was appointed by the council and then was elected twice. So I had about 9 years on the city council.
9 years in City Council, right?
Yeah, and then I ran for mayor once during that period with Anna Peterson. Anna defeated me and was elected mayor. I served as her council president for several years. And then ran for mayor on my own, whatever it is now, 3 years
That's
ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and so I've been mayor for 3 years.
As I was reading through your biography, one of the things that is really interesting to me is the different perspectives you have on politics. I mean, you've seen the workings of the House.
Uh-huh.
You've seen the workings as a lobbyist influencing our leaders, right? You've actually served on city council, and now you're mayor. What of all those experiences, like what has that taught you about politics that you bring to bear today? Seems pretty amazing perspective.
Well, it's been an interesting perspective. I'm fascinated by the process of politics, the interpersonal process of it. I enjoy people who enjoy politics, so I enjoy working with people, even people I disagree with.
Right.
I find it very interesting. I like the kind of the clash of ideas. I think it often results in, I
Healthy.
think, good public policy if it's done in a healthy way. I think at the city council level, and I found also when I was in the legislature at the time I was in, which was in the early 80s, it was not as partisan. It's changed a lot, even at city council level. It's become increasingly partisan. People have very strong opinions about how things should be done, and at times it becomes divisive. I view my job as mayor. I serve. Part of that job is to be sort of chairman of the council in terms of running council meetings and working with councilors and the staff on developing policy and then passing it. In the city council, I find that incredibly interesting, and I'm not a particularly partisan person. I'm far more interested in, can we find workable solutions that people will agree to and that we can move them forward and continue to make progress on the various issues we face. In the city, of course, there's a range of them. A lot of them are pretty fairly pedestrian to people. They're streets and fire and police
Right.
and sidewalks and
Potholes,
parks
right.
and potholes and those kinds of things. I like that because that's really where people commonly have real issues. They don't know it. They're real interested in Trump and
Right.
those guys. But in fact,
Right.
the thing
Yeah.
that's going to trip them up is their sidewalk.
The sidewalk, right, right.
And the thing that's going to wreck their tires
Right.
is the pothole.
It's a pothole, right,
And
right.
so you can kind of, I tend to find that much more interesting to work with.
Right, and I've gathered that I've watched several videos that you've been in, both talks and the state of the city, and I've read some things. It seems like one thing people really value about you is your ability to work with anybody.
Yeah.
To go in and really partner with folks and not be partisan in your disposition. And I would think that that's very important to getting things done.
I think it helps.
Yeah.
I do have some strong opinions on
course.
some issues.
Of
I have
course.
some areas of city government I like to spend time in. I'm very interested in Salem's economy, growing our economy. I believe the great confrontation for a city like Salem is the rapid growth we're facing over the next 20 years. I think we're going to see a 30% growth. When I moved here, this town was about 65,000 people. It's now almost
I would say
170,000.
we're about triple almost.
Yeah, it's just about, and we're second largest city in the state now.
Right.
And the kinds of issues that come with growth and the kinds of issues surrounding our economy, making sure that there are jobs that meet people's needs, that pay wages that allow people to find housing, making sure there's housing available that meets the wage structure in the community. I find that stuff particularly interesting and challenging.
And challenging, right. So to be honest, I think I was telling you before we started filming, right, that I'd done some straw polls. And I'll be honest with you, as I've asked people about what do they know about the city of Salem, where we get our revenues, how they're spent,
Yeah.
I would not have guessed, if I hadn't done the research prior to this interview, how much you and previous administrations in the city of Salem has been involved with housing.
Yeah.
That really surprised me. I always assumed that was county or fed or state. I had no idea how involved the city was in that. And quite successfully, it seems like, in the last few years.
Well, the city operates a housing authority. We have a housing authority. We also, through our urban renewal agency, do a lot of work with just development, development of both market and affordable housing. In the housing authority, which tends to deal with people who would be low income or potentially homeless, we currently house about 8,000 individuals in
Surprising.
a variety of housing types. The city owns several hundred housing units themselves. And we also work closely with private landlords through a voucher system that is funded by the federal government but administered by the city's housing authority. And then for the homeless, we have housed, I came in 3 years ago, we did not have a program for what we call the hard to house.
Right.
And that's no income generally, bad credit, people with health, mental
Yeah,
health,
right.
addiction issues, often felony convictions, and have been living without shelter for 10 to 15 years at a kind of a minimum to get into the program. And we've now housed 265 individuals in that program and are adding a whole series of units, one particularly devoted to mental health related issues, another one that will have a sort of post-hospital component in cooperation with Salem Health. Have about 180 of those units we're working on right now that are coming online over the next year. And I'm particularly proud of these programs we've done. We call it our Housing Rental Assistance Program.
Right.
You'll hear it referred to as HRAP. That's
Right.
probably the thing I'm most proud of. I attended the first graduation ceremony for HRAP clients. After a year, we help them transition into a different kind of housing, more traditional low-income housing from these HRAP programs, which also include substantial service delivery, dealing with the social, traumatic, medical, addiction issues they might face. That was a really moving thing. These are folks who have moved out of a tent or off the sidewalk and into real live housing and have they've really changed their lives, and I'm particularly proud of that program.
I think that's
Real
fabulous.
excited about it, yeah.
Again, it was surprising to me, and I'm saying that with some humility and a little embarrassment, how little I knew about what the city was involved with.
Yeah. Remember, when I was in newspapering here, we had two newspapers. I worked for the afternoon paper.
Right.
There was a morning paper. They each had, I was a city hall reporter, and I had a fellow named Ron Blankenbaker was my counterpart at the morning paper, The Statesman. And we competed to cover City Hall, so there was lots of information in the public media. That was the primary source of information. It's changed
Changed,
dramatically.
It's
We
changed.
don't have a television station. We have good radio stations, but they have limited resources as well in terms of having reporters in the field. The city becomes its own reporter and really uses social media, and social media meets a lot of needs for information. It's not always accurate, or it's not always trusted. It depends on how you're looking at it. So it becomes problematic, and it doesn't cover sort of the day-to-day operations and how it works. We don't offer a lot of civics at this level in our public schools. So I'm not surprised. And, at some point, we're all living our lives. How much government can we absorb? We're bombarded on television with national. We're bombarded by the local Portland stations on our state level.
Right.
How much of this can you really absorb and understand?
Well, correct. And with the democratization of data, the advent of the internet from the
Oh.
1970s, so much information is on demand.
Yeah.
Right? And so
And,
people
and you have to ask the right question.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to go to Google to find out about city government, you better know what you're asking for. You're
Correct.
going to get Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You know a lot
I've gotten
about
that before. Yeah, right. Oh, you had witch trials here?
witch trials here. Yeah, yeah.
That's good. Hey, so one thing I did want to ask you about was give people a sense about Salem. Where does Salem get its income from? I mean, after doing some research, I think I have a general grasp about it. Where's the money spent? What's the economics of Salem right now for someone who might be unfamiliar or vaguely familiar with the operations of a city like Salem?
Yeah, Salem is about a $400 million enterprise. The largest amount of that tends to occur in public works, which is water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, sort of transportation. Generally, that is funded by gas taxes, a thing called systems development charges, which is the cost to new development for sort of joining the group by coming into town, help them pay for streets and water and sewer and sidewalks that have that need or have been developed in their area. The city's general fund, which is what pays for sort of the services we all think of, I think, as kind of basic city services like police, fire, planning.
Water?
No, water is separate. Those are
Separate, okay.
utilities, and they're actually
They're not from the
done through
general.
a fee.
Okay, those are.
Yeah, those are part of Public Works. Public Works handles water and sewer as well. The general fund really is the parks, the library, the police, the fire. Those are the big programs. That's about $150 million, and that's where a lot of the discussion occurs, because those are the kind of services that people are kind of watching for that feel a little more discretionary than water, sewer, and that kind of public safety type, or that kind of public health type stuff. That is generally paid for with property taxes. That's the most common way people pay directly to city government, is through a property tax. And that covers, the property tax collected in Salem covers the cost about of police and fire. Not quite, but almost covers the cost of police and fire.
Almost.
That's all property tax covers.
Almost covers. police and
Almost
fire.
covers it,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And then there are just other sources of income, whether it's franchise fees, what we charge people to put up light poles and
Right.
dig trenches and bury power lines and things like that. And tickets, and I
Right,
mean, there's
tickets.
just a whole bunch of
Everybody
those.
knows that one, right?
All, yeah, tickets. And not a lot from that, but some. And sort of you put it all together, grants, and that pays the $150 million. So it's a fairly unstable system. It pays for, when I say it only pays for police and fire, realize we have 1,200 other employees in the city, and so it's a little bit iffy, and it's been particularly impacted by, if folks remember, the passage of Measures 5 and 50, which set up essentially caps on the growth of property taxes to about 3% per year. And it almost keeps up. And this past year, I know the city council passed a fee on utility bills that's a straight up operating fee to try to backfill some of the costs for just basic city services. And then there is in May a employee paid payroll tax that'll be on the ballot, looking again for some additional funding. The operating fee is a fairly common thing being done by cities statewide. I know Kaiser has done it. I think Amsville tried to do it. Other cities have used that. It's a pretty regressive system. It's kind of flat rate. If you get a water bill, you're going to owe whatever, $8 extra or whatever the
Right.
number is. I don't remember it off the top of my head. So that's kind of how it's funded. The budget is developed by the city manager, and I talk a little about our government system, but it's developed by the city manager in conjunction with his finance and department head staff, kind of his cabinet. That goes to a citizens budget committee, which is half city council, half members of the public. If anyone's interested in becoming a member of a budget committee, it's a great way to learn how and what the city does, how it works, where the money goes, how it's collected and all that. And then it's finally approved by the city council, and that's how we determine how the money's going to be spent. It's a very public process.
Right.
It occurs in April and May. We get very little public input on it, surprisingly little public input. But it's very important. I think people who think we don't have enough police officers, or our emphasis is not on traffic enough, that this town is not safe to walk in, that our we don't have connected bike pathways for people to travel on. We need more code enforcement. The guy next door is leaving garbage in his yard, and I want to call somebody. Our fire department is extraordinarily active, particularly in emergency medical services. I'll just give you factoids I think are often interesting to understand. The fire department gets called out on around, let's just say, 700 fires a year. They are called out on 20,000 medical emergencies.
This is just Salem.
Just Salem.
Yeah. And how many employees are we talking the fire side?
Ooh, I was afraid you'd ask that. As I said that, it's 150, let's say.
Okay, it's called 150.
Something like that. And it may be more, maybe a couple hundred.
And you're saying on a yearly basis?
Yeah, they are really busy in
How many
that
fires and how many medical emergencies did you say?
It'd be about 20,000 medical emergencies, medical calls.
20,000 medical emergencies?
Versus 700 fires.
Wow.
So when you think about what your firefighters do, they're all trained EMTs.
Right.
They're an extraordinarily well-trained force. And the chief here has done some tremendous work working with school kids. I think if I recall correctly, about 18,000 kids have been trained in CPR and the use of defibrillators.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah, we are running way ahead of the national average, which is about 32%. We're running about 50% save rate when someone has a really substantial cardiac event.
I couldn't believe when I heard that, actually.
Yeah,
we're 50% and growing.
Yeah, we're growing toward 80.
80, and the national is like 32?
32, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they have,
That's amazing.
The department and their leadership have done an amazing job in this area. And they have developed protocols and are working on protocols that will, as I said, hopefully grow that 50 to 80%. There are certain ways you can deal with people, and this is is the cardiac emergencies. There are certain things you can do to really have high save rates in that particular event in a person's life. And as our community ages, that's a pretty big deal. I'm 71 years old, so I sort of keep track of this kind of how are things going.
There's a little radar tracking.
It
matters.
What's my chances of
right.
hitting the deck and coming up?
50% right now.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, good. That's actually an impressive stat. And so when you mentioned the budget, one thing that comes to mind is, first of all, again, before preparing for this interview, I had no idea.
Yeah.
$400 million.
Yeah, it may be a little in excess of that. It's a good size enterprise.
I wonder if you were to compare that to all the businesses, it would have to be top 10, top 20, just in size of, from a revenue perspective.
Yeah.
You got the Oregon, you've got Nike, you've got Intel, right? You got all those great
We're
places.
pretty major.
It's huge.
For this community. A lot of what we do is, buy concrete, buy asphalt, treat water, things like that. It is a major, and it's also a fairly major employer. We're not the biggest employer. Our biggest single, if you were to look at broadly, is the state of Oregon.
State of Oregon, right.
Second largest is the hospital.
Correct, yeah.
And when you look at our total employment, government employment with the state, county, school district, which is the second largest school district in the state, the city is the second largest city. a fairly substantial part of our working population works in government,
of some
probably a
kind.
third.
That's large, yeah.
I believe that's right, or close to that. So but one of the things we've done over the years is work very hard to diversify the economy here. We have right now, probably like most of the United States, a very low unemployment rate, very low unemployment rate. And wages are going up. The economy here, I think all you have to do is kind of look around, and this place is booming in terms of development, new businesses, the availability of space to add new businesses is growing, but it's barely keeping up with demand. We have very, very low vacancy rates in the commercial, retail, industrial sectors. We have speculative development there. We have very low vacancy in housing as well. Our housing rates, there's a certain number, a percentage that you have to have in order for people to sell, buy, and move. And we're running right at the edge of that there is enough vacancy for people to be able to come into town, find a place, and live. It's pretty challenging, which helps explain, I think, some of the impact on rents and housing costs here. Although we are actually a very affordable market for housing purchases. So right now we're in a pretty sweet spot in terms of our economic well-being.
Well, it's pretty fascinating. So one of the questions I had as you were describing that is, so generally speaking, if I'm hearing you right, Salem, the revenues that Salem receives from its various sources, taxes and fees and things, are keeping up, but sounds like just kind of barely. There's not a lot of excess at the end of the year.
Not a lot of discretion for new, and people are always sort of like, well, why don't you just do, and homelessness is the best example, why don't you do this, 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 and this? Well, because we don't have the discretionary revenue to do that. And you have to have a certain kind of revenue that gives you the discretion to go out and do certain things. And that's probably the most frustrating. Each year it feels like city council's being told, and I think correctly so, you have about $100,000 to $200,000 you can do in sort of new and different programs. It's not a lot of money.
It's not very much.
No, it really isn't. So we are working on new strategies to develop affordable housing using urban renewal, which is a big funding area for economic and housing and other kinds of development, commercial and industrial development here. We're doing some, I think, real creative ideas in terms of small, really spot urban renewal areas where the urban renewal funds that develop from development, they're actually, the taxes go back into the area, can be put into affordable housing to start adding to our affordable housing stock. We're like every other community in the United States. We're sort of impacted by the lack of housing policy at both the federal and state level. So as we as cities try to fill that gap, we have to become pretty creative in how to get housing built, and particularly to get affordable housing built. And I use the term affordable knowing full well affordable to me is not affordable to someone else. I mean, that affordability is a pretty flexible way to describe housing.
So that was another very surprising thing I discovered in my research, was not just the things we've talked about, but how much the city is doing for affordable housing. The number of projects that you're juggling right now was actually I was like, whoa, Salem's involved in that.
Yeah,
Salem's involved in that. Like, oh, I've seen this go up over here. And even the development of, say, urban renewal or development, the hotel going across from the convention center.
Yeah.
I had no idea that the city's involved in kind of coordinating, helping, sometimes buying properties, making it available for development.
That's been the real success of downtown especially, but there's I can talk about other parts of town where there are urban renewal areas. But the riverfront urban renewal area is really came into being in the 70s. It's a 40-year-old project. I mean, it's an old urban renewal area. But what it did that was really, I think, visionary was say we are going to save a historic downtown as a historic downtown. And as you redevelop a downtown like that, it's very expensive to fix up those old buildings. It's often a lot cheaper to knock the old ones down and toss
build a
up
new
some,
one,
build a new one. And we did not do that,
So
which I
thankful.
think was great.
So thankful. I love downtown Salem.
It's really
look, its
neat.
feel, and the buildings that we go into, the new restaurants.
Yeah.
I love the feel of these old buildings.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. And at the same time, there also, I think, were some interesting decisions made that we're dealing with the outcome of, which was a lot of old single-room occupancy hotels were downtown. There were not several of them. The one people probably remember most is the old Senator Hotel, and these were kind of a pensioner hotel. Small rooms, people ate probably in a restaurant, they might have a hot plate in their room. But those came down to build the Salem Center Mall. This was the era of the mall, was going to be. Lancaster Mall came in and they were putting up, decided, well, what we need is a covered mall area downtown to be competitive. And the result was we lost some substantial housing. The same thing happened. We're at the CCTV studios. When I was a student, I lived in a real cheap apartment in this neighborhood. This was a bunch of old apartment houses and very, very cheap housing. You can imagine with students living in it.
I remember those.
Not that we were.
Top ramen and the small.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, we didn't even have top ramen.
No,
It was
Johnny,
pretty
what
much
did
a
you
can
do?
of beans
What
if you were
did you
lucky.
do?
Yeah. But we lost a lot of housing here, and it ultimately was replaced by the Robert Lindsay Tower across the street, which offers about 64 units for low-income elderly. But we didn't really replace all of that housing. And one of the things I think has partially affected our homeless situation and the difficulty people have meeting housing needs was the loss of some of that close-in, very low-income housing. It was not great. I got to tell you, it was not great. These were pretty old, rickety old buildings, but
they provided the service that was necessary.
really necessary. So
We've lost that.
trying to recreate that in the current economy is enormously challenging, and particularly without really strong support from the larger governments around us, the state and feds. And we have developed some really good projects with the state of Oregon. We've been very fortunate having them here in town. We work with them, do a lot of work. The Cornerstone project out on Portland Road, which is a large low-income development, really was a cooperative venture with state, private, and city resources being combined to put that together.
Some grant money involved in that as well?
Probably. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was. As you say that, it was a large group put that all together, and a real model of how this can be done. So we're working constantly on how to kind of create opportunities for developers to make this kind of commitment. And it's difficult. Low income or affordable housing doesn't mean it's cheap. It just means
Housing is expensive.
housing is just flat
Housing
out
is
expensive. So it takes government involvement, and I'm very proud of Salem. It has a long tradition of involvement in this area, and we have really some well-developed, well-understood tools that we try to bring to bear on the issues involved. And we're doing the same thing with homeless housing as well. You just can't do it as fast as you would like. And these are problems that developed over the years, decades.
You don't
We're
solve
trying
them
to deal with
overnight.
them in a couple of years, but you know, it's what people expect.
Right.
And you better, if you don't like it, get out, you know.
Well,
You have to like
congratulations on how
trying.
much you have done. In fact, this would be a great time for us to transition.
Yeah.
You are well known actually for your work on homelessness. And I was watching, and by the way, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I strongly recommend you Google State of the City Address 2020, at least, if not even prior ones. It was an amazing speech you gave, and
Oh,
very,
thank you.
very informative as to what's going on in the city of Salem. You said something startling in that speech. That was
Oh, great.
Oh, no, great. Yeah, no, this is good stuff. You were talking about all the housing that you're building. Like I said, surprised me that you've got like 9,000 people in housing. The hard to house segment of the population specifically. I love how was it
Jimmy Jones.
Jimmy Jones? You did the analysis and you started to segment. You got the hard to house, which is people, with haven't been on the streets 10 to 15 years, maybe a criminal record, and you targeted very specific groups. But you said in the State of the City address that we're at a place now, and thank you, a place now where you can say there's no reason for anyone to camp on the streets. Between the warm shelters, your partnerships with faith-based organizations, what the city's been doing, there are enough places for people to go.
I think on a nightly basis that can be true. We don't have. I want to be real clear because it can really. I think the language is complicated in this area. It may be a mat on the floor out of the rain, or out of the snow if there's snow or the cold weather. But what we can do is get people to shelter. And we know that there are beds or empty spaces available at like Union Gospel Mission and other locations where people have been offered the opportunity to go into those, and for a variety of reasons. And all of them, I'm not going to say they're not legitimate, but they are ones that are part of the reason people might find themselves in a situation that they choose not to go in, which has led me to believe very strongly we need to have what's called a low barrier shelter where you can come in and be drunk. You can come in using drugs. You can come in with your pit bull. You can come in with your partner or spouse or significant other and have a place to spend the night. That is not true in all organizations. A lot of organizations, and I believe we're one of them, through our HRAP program, are trying to convince people that that's not a viable lifestyle. If you stay in that lifestyle of living rough, as they sometimes call it, you're going to die at about 52 on average. You're not going to live a full and kind of complete life. And so we're going to continue, along with our nonprofit and religious partners, to work with people to get them out of that life. That is not what we should hold as a reasonable lifestyle. That's not. That's not what people hope their lives will be. And when we can help them get out of it, we should. But we also have the problem of the people who just aren't ready. They haven't hit the bottom, they haven't hit a point, or they have such profound traumatic or mental or addiction issues that they just can't quite get there yet. We still need to work on getting them into some kind of shelter. Leaving them unsheltered in our community creates nothing but conflict between them, among them, around them, with the range of neighbors that we all have. It's just not one that works well in any neighborhood, and I think all you have to do over the past several months is see what's happened downtown. When an incomplete camping ban was passed by the council without also taking up the question of can you just then throw a blanket on the street and lay in the street, lay on the sidewalk, still shooting drugs, still drinking, still in mental crisis, in traumatic crisis. And the answer really is no. So we've got to find, and we are working constantly on these issues. We're down at the legislature now. I think today they're not there. They're out of town. Some of them are in Idaho. But we will continue to work with them looking for funding to assist us.
Right.
We've had tremendous support from our legislative delegation to move forward with some help
So you were
from
saying,
them.
yeah.
We don't have the resources to solve this problem. A lot of people kind of, and I'll epitomize the context.
Do you mean the city of Salem?
City of Salem, yeah.
Does
City
not
of
have
Salem.
the resources to solve
We
this problem,
just
right.
don't have the money or the full capacity. It's not what we do. We've not been a social service agency before, but it's become part of the mission is to start looking at this differently, and we have been transitioning, I think, fairly rapidly to begin to deal with the issues we're looking at, particularly working closely with our nonprofit contingent sector in the community that works in this area to put together programs that deal with these issues. And the challenge, and I think I was honest in the state of the city, is particularly for our downtown area, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars saving and improving this downtown, making it what people told us for many, many years was their top issue. We want a vibrant downtown. We have created a vibrant downtown. It is a great place to visit, eat, shop, hang out. We now have about 50 unsheltered folks living down there that are in conflict with that
Right.
process. And I think it's intolerable. I think it's intolerable for them. I think it's intolerable for the community. I think we have to get that taken care of as quickly as possible. The council has set itself on a course, I think, to try to deal with it. It's very difficult to deal with, particularly if people don't want to
Right.
take some movement toward normalizing their lives. And we will continue to work with them.
You know, I think this to me is where politics is both invigorating, I think exciting, and to me fulfills a human mission.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, you as the mayor of Salem, walking a line between saying, yes, we have a mission for economic growth and creating an environment for sustainability.
Yeah,
And we have compassion for the homeless.
yeah.
And these are not either or, it's both and.
You got to do both.
And you're walking this out. You're walking both a compassionate view towards the homeless, at the same time trying to develop the economics of the city and lay the foundation for the next 20, 30, 40 years of downtown.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Now, it's part of being in politics is you're going to be criticized from both sides. You're not
Correct.
doing it right. You're not doing enough. Well, okay. I'm doing everything I can to accomplish these goals. I know the city, I know the public, the religious community, the nonprofit community. I think everyone's doing everything they can to work on this. The other is we're dealing with some really profound medical, mental, and social problems
Real
that,
issues.
you know, I can work hard with the private sector to create this really excellent employment base where if you want a job and if you'll show up every day, we got a job for you.
Good job, right?
But if I don't have a person who's able yet to take advantage of that, how do we help that transition? What is our role to helping a person through that door? Back into society in a more fulfilling way for everybody, and that's challenging.
perfectly said.
We have a whole 12-step set of programs out there set up. We have treatment programs. We have mental health programs set up to help with those, but we still got to get people to go into those programs looking for assistance to get out of what must be I can't believe it's not just a really horrible
really
situation
difficult
at times.
situation,
Yeah,
right.
really frightening. I really sympathize with folks, and there are reasons each of those problems exist. I mentioned I worked at Damish when I came out of college. It was the State Hospital for Portland, and the clientele that I worked with were people who were addicted, who were in serious, deep alcoholic problem, in delirium treatments and other kinds of just profound impact of alcohol, as well as serious mental health crises. And that's who our clientele was. And what we did by having those institutions was assist people in getting themselves stabilized, getting their health back, and then working them back into the community. Those institutions no longer exist for a variety of reasons, good and bad.
Right.
But we didn't come up with a really good replacement.
Right. We never did.
Never got it right.
And we're dealing with that today, aren't we?
Oh,
Yeah.
we are. And funding for group homes, which
Right.
was a common thing here. And so when I first got on the council, everybody thought in our neighborhood we had the most group homes of any place in town. Suddenly there were no group homes. The funding was pulled out from under them. And what happened to those clientele when they closed Bearview? What happened with people with developmental issues or cognitive issues of different kinds? Where are those folks supposed to go?
Right. Yeah, there was no place to go.
There wasn't. There was no place for them. So we have to also be, and I think it's important, we all recognize we have to be extremely compassionate about what we're seeing here. This is a problem not just of an individual's creation. It's shared. We all share in this.
We all share in some of
this
this, and I
issue.
love that perspective because I remember when all those institutions closed.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a solution at that time.
No,
There was
it was
nothing
just-
like they were
We're
shut
just
down.
going to save a lot of money.
Yeah, see ya.
What?
Yeah, good luck.
At
right?
their expense. That's
Right.
terrible.
Good luck,
It's
yeah.
terrible.
Well, I really appreciate the work you've been doing on that. So thank you for that and the work of the of City Council.
Oh, yeah. I give a lot of credit to the council. I think, and I don't think I hope no one's surprised to find out as the months pass, every so-called solution is imperfect, and there will have to be continued visiting of these issues and modifications and adjustments and programs, and some are going to work, some aren't. But a simple solution like, well, why don't you just do tiny houses? That'll take care of all of them. No, it won't. No, it won't. We allow tiny houses. I think we've had 26 built here in town since we allowed that to occur a year or two ago. Kmart is a common one. Sort of create a barracks at Kmart out on
Yeah.
25th and Mission.
Right.
Well, in case no one noticed, somebody owns Kmart, and they have indicated they're not interested in
Right.
being a
Yeah, you
shelter.
can't just force right.
No, or
just force a
let them
barracks.
build at the old Capitol Auto grounds out there. Well, somebody owns that,
Somebody-
and they are not interested in having a camp there.
Right.
Put a camp out on the state fairgrounds. Well, I can assure you, out in those neighborhoods, they don't want a camp in
Right.
their neighborhood. And the state fairgrounds are being used on almost a daily basis anymore. So there are a lot of fairly easy sounding solutions, including why don't you have porta potties downtown? We have had porta potties downtown. They were used for illegal activities. They were vandalized. They were trashed, and we no longer can get a porta potty company to come in. So we're going to have to own porta potties, and we got to figure out how to take
And
care
maintain
of them
them.
and maintain them. So there's some challenges.
Appreciate you saying that. This is actually really important, I think, as people watch this, to be informed, as these aren't easy solutions.
No, I
They're
wish they were.
complex,
They
right?
sound easy.
Right.
They genuinely sound, and when I hear them, it's like the person's using a lot of common sense, saying,
Right.
look, if you don't want them to go to the bathroom on your sidewalk, why
Porta
not give them a
potty.
place to go? Well, we have, and it didn't work.
I can't be honest with you. I actually said that the other day to my wife. I was like, why didn't Salem put some porta potties?
We're going to try it
Right.
again. I think we'll try
Okay.
it again. We're also looking at there's a restroom over in Marion Square Park that
Right.
was absolutely trashed,
Right. I remember
totally
you mentioned that,
vandalized.
yeah.
Got an estimate today. It'll cost about $20,000
Mm.
to redo it and harden it so that it'll be more difficult to destroy, and we'll have to monitor it 24/7.
Well, that's additional cost.
Well, it is,
Yeah,
it's, yeah, and that's coming out of the general fund.
That's the
And
general
I told
fund,
you
okay,
about the
you're right.
200,000 maybe.
Right, and right. Now, when you talked about the additional $8, say, per line for water.
Or whatever it
you know,
is,
what
I
would-
apologize.
No, forget the number,
Yeah,
I understand.
the number,
it's-
yeah,
But whatever that number is, would that go to general? Does that stay within?
goes to general
Okay,
fund.
so it'd be general, so that's potential some options there.
So it opens options. What it does is guarantee we won't have layoffs in our police, fire,
Right.
and other employee forces at this point. Because we have labor unions. We negotiate with 3 labor unions at the city. And these employees are also trying to keep up with affordable housing
Cost
and
of
the
living,
other,
the housing in the area.
all
has
the
gone
rest
up.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying we've been on an amazing housing boom since, I forget the year, but it's been,
Oh, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
We've got one going in people may remember this, the old Pick Sweet mushroom plant
Right.
out Cordon Road and State Street. 600, almost 700 homes are going in out there.
it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard that in the State of the City address. That's fantastic.
It's just remarkable how much
Fantastic.
growth is going on here. And those houses will sell about as fast as they're built. So, you know,
And that provides a base then again for city revenue from a tax perspective.
It does.
As well as, water and sewage and those things.
yeah, and we
building
estimate, I tend to work with about a 3% growth every year in property taxes. It grows about
3%.
2 to 3%. In a recession, it can go differently. Right now, we're in a growth spurt, so I suspect we'll see 2 to 3% growth in revenues.
Well, and you're capped at 3% because of the.
Can't go any further.
Any higher, right?
We're there.
Okay, yeah.
That's it. And we will, and as I said, that amount of money just barely covers police and fire.
Not quite.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Almost. So that's kind of the reality of funding these days.
It's good for people to know because people want their fire department, they want their police fully staffed. I've only got 8 minutes left, and I have a few questions I want
Sure,
to ask
I'm
you.
sorry.
Actually, oh, this is fantastic. Actually, thank you. I wanted to ask you about the third bridge. Now, I know this comes up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I've been hearing about this forever.
Yeah.
And you made an interesting case for it at the State of the City address about the economics of it, about the traffic, about the people going through town and those that won't go through town, and what we're losing as a city by not having the access.
Yeah.
And if we were to lose a bridge, what would happen, like in terms of people getting access to health care? I mean, I'd never thought about the safety issue.
Well, there's a basic safety issue. I think there's an environmental case for a third bridge in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions that folks are talking about. And I think the one that probably is most talked about is access between west side, east side, people trying to get to school, trying to get to work, but there's a whole nother component, and it's the economic impact on our total community, really from Lincoln City to Bend. That is a bottleneck
It's
right
a bottleneck right there.
yeah, and it comes right through our downtown. And so you can be downtown and you're going to have the traffic that occurs on a major highway passing right by you all the time. And that has been one of the discussion items downtown is how do we cut down on the traffic to make it more pedestrian friendly, more accessible. And I have continued to believe a third bridge outside of the downtown is really the only viable solution. And just so you know, I have some history on this. One of the first stories I wrote back in the 70s, was the third bridge off Mission Street that was
Really?
going, yeah, that was going to go. Didn't, for a variety of good reasons, but
Right.
any reason not to do it's also got a reason. I mean,
Right.
it's a reason, but at some point, I think this community will just have to come to grips with the need for dealing with the issues now. I know there are other points of view. I understand them. I appreciate them, that what we need to do is get people out of their cars, into buses. All that does not deal with this regional economic problem. And really the economic problem over in West Salem that has an old industrial area that really needs to we really worked hard to get ready to redevelop. But without really good, solid, guaranteed access to the freeway and to the markets represented by Portland and other areas, we're going to have a hard time
It's
selling.
hard to move forward, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to move forward. So someday we're going to have to deal with this.
Right.
And we got as close as we possibly could. We spent 13 years, the community, putting together the site at Pine Street.
Right.
And through a quirk, which is a change in the city council, people were actively elected saying, I'm opposed to the third bridge, and the result was, the outcome of those elections was a couple of decisions that needed to be made were made negatively toward the third bridge and stopped that process
stopped the
cold.
process.
And
Oh.
that's how
That's how it works.
government works.
That's how government works.
Yeah,
right? It's
it
part of the
really is.
process.
Yeah. So but I continue to believe it will have to be dealt with at some point. And a lot of people who oppose that third bridge say we'll do another one. The problem is these take a generation to build. They're expensive, they're complicated, they involve land use, they involve major environmental studies. You don't just say, let's put it up here at
Right.
Wheatland or put it down there
Right.
at Buena Vista. It doesn't
Yeah,
work
right.
that way.
Let's start tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. Sure we will.
Hey, before we close out, Mayor, I'd like to ask you, what do you love most about Salem as a mayor and having been involved in city council and the legislature all these years? And what do you find the most challenging thing?
Well, homelessness is the most challenging. It is so difficult because it involves individuals and individual lives and all that. I absolutely love this town. It has a spirit of volunteerism, of solid support for city government. We have thousands of volunteer hours at our library, with the police, with the fire department, with others, all different groups. That tremendous sense of volunteerism, a very strong nonprofit, and I think really good restaurants.
It's really good.
We've got great
Great restaurants.
live theater, which is something
do.
I'm.
A lot of people don't know that about Salem.
Oh yeah, we've got Pentacle, Vertigo, and Enlightened Theatrics. Right here, you
Right
can
here in
see
town.
live theater almost any time you want to go see it. I think it's just fabulous. I love it, and we have a great education system. Willamette University, oldest university in the West,
Right.
along with Corbin, now Western Oregon moving downtown with a part of their campus. Chemeketa Community College is just an outstanding institution. Our public schools are just very, very good and constantly improving. And just some of the nicest people. Obviously, I've spent my life
Right,
here,
right.
so
Well,
it's
you
just
might- you may be a little
lot of
biased, right?
friends. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends here. People greet each other on the street. It's just, I think, a great place to live, to have raised family, to have retired now. I think it's going to be increasingly a great place to grow old. And our population is aging rapidly. And we have, I think, just for a city our size, the very best healthcare system you could ask for.
It's amazing.
There's nothing quite
amazing,
like it.
right.
Salem Health, the Salem Hospital System, and it's
Especially in the
800
cardiac
docs.
area, correct? Right.
It's heart, cardiac, but oncology. They are absolutely an outstanding hospital that is making themselves better on a regular basis. They employ 5,000 people in healthcare in Salem.
And good salaries, good wages.
Good salaries. It's just a great system. So there's so much to be pleased with, to enjoy, and to be proud of in this community. To be its mayor is just a genuine honor.
That's Great.
It's a volunteer job, by the way. I want people to know that, as is the city council. So you almost have to love it to agree to do it.
Okay, that's good. Okay, if you could speak to the citizens of Salem and say someone wanted to get involved and be involved, whether it's a homelessness or with any other issue, what would you say to people living in town as far as getting connected? Because you made an interesting point earlier that so few people are involved. What would be a starting point?
Well, if you're at all interested in serving on a board, a commission, you'd like to know about volunteer opportunities, contact the mayor's office, talk to Linda Rose. She specializes in helping find you a commission or a board that you'd be interested in serving on. If you can think of anything you'd like to be involved in, we probably have a place for you, or we know an organization in town that is looking for the opportunity to help you put your skills to use for your community. So I hope you'll take the time and contact me, and we'll find a spot.
That's good. Mayor, such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
so much.
enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
And thank you.